Hi, I'm Corinne Pepin. I'm a Senior Vice President at 2CV Research. While I'm not a techie in any way, I've been curious about how generative AI can help us solve our biggest pain points as researchers. So I've experimented since ChatGPT came out last year. One of the most compelling use cases is the one I want to talk about today, which is how we've been able to leverage generative AI to help us assess the quality of open-ended responses in surveys. So here's our agenda. We're going to talk about the current challenges with open-end responses. Then I will show how we've used GPT to help us assess the quality of open ends. And finally, we'll talk about some best practices and learnings that have emerged from our experimentation with GPT. Let's first take a quick step back. Data quality in market research has been a hot topic for quite some time. The key is to apply various layers of protection throughout the research process, as there is no silver bullet. The first layer is the pre-survey. This is where we can detect any fraudulent activity happening at the device level. Then we move on to the survey layer, which includes all the checks that researchers incorporate into their surveys. This layer includes a variety of measures ranging from basic checks like survey speed to more advanced quality control traps. The important part here is that all of these checks are automated. They're built into the survey itself, and participants who don't pass these checks are automatically filtered out. However, we can't solely rely on automation. There are certain checks that cannot be automated within the survey, which means that we still have to put in a significant effort on the back end. So when it comes to evaluating the quality of open-end responses, we usually follow two approaches. First is that we assess the open ends within the survey itself using an automated process. And secondly, we conduct post-survey checks where a researcher is required to manually review the responses at the end of fieldwork. So now you might be wondering why we still need to check open-ended responses manually if there are tools available to check them. So let me explain that. In-survey validation will typically flag the obvious issues like profanity, gibberish, cutting and pasting, really bad grammar. You have some examples here, and these participants were not even allowed to continue with the main questionnaire. Our biggest challenge lies with respondents who don't make these obvious mistakes but still provide invalid open-ended responses because they fail to address the actual question. So here, for example, we're asking about a type of payment and we get answers back about Tesla and even Donald Trump. So these answers are completely out of context, yet they were not caught in the survey. When we initially started experimenting with ChatGPT, we were super excited by its ability to understand context. So not only it could help us assess basic quality aspects like gibberish, but also examine the contextual relevance of open-end responses. This particular pain point is precisely where GPT can make a significant impact in market research. This is a really simple example using ChatGPT. First, we have to set the context. We tell ChatGPT that we are a research assistant and we did help to detect fake survey responses. Please always start your answers with yes if you think the response is real and no if you think the response is fake. Then we add our survey question. And then we add the participant answer. So here the question was about the future of work, and the answer is, I believe that the future of work is probably going to be a lot of AI automated jobs, so people will probably got toward the creative side of things, and also the page probably increased by a few dollars, but not enough to match with inflation. So here it does answer the question. There are a few typos, but ChatGPT doesn't mind, and the assessment is yes, the response seems to be genuine. Now this is great, but there are some significant limitations when using ChatGPT for this task. First is that you cannot train the model, which means it won't learn from your own assessment and won't improve over time. And secondly, scalability becomes an issue. It's not feasible to input each answer one at a time, especially when you're dealing with thousands of responses across multiple projects. In order to make this process more practical, we need to automate it using the API. Let's break down the process into 3 simple steps. First, we start by using Google Apps Script to build a customized verify response formula. This formula integrates with the OpenAI Chat Completion API, allowing us to receive a binary assessment, yes or no, along with a corresponding reason. Step 2 involves providing open-ended responses as training data. By doing so, we enable the model to learn and generate more accurate assessment for similar open-ended responses. And finally, step 3 is to continuously enhance the model's performance. And to do this, we run open-ended responses in batches. This iterative process helps refine the training data and progressively improves the model's abilities over time. Let me show you exactly what it looks like when this is set up. We have a Google Sheet here with 4 different worksheets: detector, question, sample, and settings. Here are the settings. In row 1, you would place the API key that you obtained from OpenAI. In row 2, we have the temperature setting. Temperature refers to a parameter that controls the degree of randomness or creativity in the model's output. I have it set at 0.5 here so that we allow GPT to be a little creative, but not too creative. Moving on, we have our training data in the following worksheet. Here we use actual answers from the survey and code them to teach GPT what we consider is good or bad. When we code these responses, we have the flexibility to provide any assessment we want, whether it's a simple yes, no, or maybe, or we can request more detailed, such as indicating if the response feels too generic or if it's gibberish, etc. This is really up to you how you want to code it. Personally, I find it useful to have additional information because I'm able to sort the responses by reasons for rejection and quickly review them. I can't emphasize enough how crucial this step is. The model's performance will solely depend on the quality of the training it receives. It's similar to training a colleague to perform a specific task. While you could rely on their judgment, it's always helpful to provide examples to ensure they fully understand the task at hand. In the next worksheet, we have the survey question. And then finally, this is the worksheet where you input your respondent level data and run the formula to obtain GPT's assessment. In column C, you would simply copy this formula into each row. This will trigger the Google Apps script to assess each open-ended response and provide the corresponding assessment. Finally, this is where all the magic happens. While it's possible to run the formula on hundreds of open-ended responses at once, I recommend starting with batches, especially when initially training the model. This allows you to assess how GPT is coding these answers. So if you find that you disagree with its assessment, you may need to go back to the training data and incorporate additional examples. In my experience, I realized that the first time I did this, I provided open ends that were too good. I had selected the best answers, and that resulted in the model rejecting too many responses that were not necessarily bad, but just not as clearly expressed as the best one. However, there is a way around it. You can use the Google Translate formula to translate from French to English in this case, and then use the formula to assess the quality. I must say that the model's assessment here significantly improved after the translation step. So I think a key learning is that we need to keep in mind that when we're dealing with new languages or different audience, some level of fine-tuning might be necessary. We can't simply assume that people from different countries or different generations, for example, would respond in exactly the same way. Ultimately, is it better than a human doing this job? Not really. But is it faster? Yes. And is it better than doing nothing about your open ends? Absolutely. In the end, practice makes perfect. AI models are only as effective as the data they're trained on. If you find that the model is not performing as expected, don't hesitate to go back and revisit your prompts and update the training data accordingly. It's all about continuous improvement and fine-tuning to achieve the desired outcome. We wanted to wrap up with some best practices, as this is completely uncharted territory and we are learning as we go. So number 1, about data confidentiality. There has been some discussion regarding the handling of data once it has been processed by GPT. So one way around that is not to use client data for something like this, but to use a generic open-end questions designed solely for quality purposes. Number 2, efficiency. The process itself is straightforward, but there is some back and forth required to fine-tune the model. So to streamline this process, it's a good idea to create a bank of questions that can be used across multiple surveys, so you don't have to train the model from scratch every time. Accuracy. In general, it's good practice to term participants based on them failing multiple quality checks and not just one. So this still holds true. You could use two open-ends that have been checked by GPT, or combine one open-end with other QC trap in the survey to make that final judgment call. Tuning, as I mentioned before, it's important to carefully monitor the model's performance when introducing new countries or new target audience, because we can't assume they're going to answer an open-end exactly in the same way. Validation. What we notice is that we agree more often on what constitutes a good response, but sometimes disagree on what is considered a bad response. And it's not that GPT is wrong, but we as researchers may be more forgiving. So our strategy has been to review the responses that GPT rejected and not automatically remove these responses. And finally, survey integration. How close are we to incorporating this type of checks directly into the survey? Well, there's already a company working on it, so it's not too far off. However, considering the complexity of training the model to avoid flagging valid respondents, it might be wise to initially flag suspicious respondents rather than immediately terming them until we're really confident in the model's accuracy. In this way, we can gradually assess and fine-tune its performance before implementing it within the survey. I hope you found this information useful. While generative AI may not completely replace humans, it serves as a valuable tool for automating and streamlining the assessment of open-ended responses. It increases efficiency, saves us time, and improves data quality overall. Thank you.